Hello and welcome to a new episode of Las Platicas, a show hosted by Comadres y Comics where we meet with creators, friends, and talk about upcoming projects, events, and all around awesome news in the comic community. Today we have the pleasure of having the creative team behind the comic book Nuclear Power published by Fanbase Press. Co-writers Desiree Proctor and Erica Harrell have collaborated in a variety of projects from film, television, and video games. Their comic book, Deadshot Mercy, was published in 2017, and Nuclear Power is their first original comic series. Also with us is Lynne Yoshii, illustrator and letterer of Nuclear Power. Her works include Marvel's Voices Identity #1, DC Comics New Talent Showcase 2017, Gotham City Garage, and Wonder Women of History. She has also provided cover illustrations for Boom Studios and Dark Horse Comics. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh my gosh, I gotta say, first of all, welcome to Las Platicas. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Unfortunately, Jen and Kristen could not be here today, but they really send their apologies because they really wanted to be here because we totally loved your comic book. So we're gonna get right into it, guys. Please introduce yourselves and describe your personal entry into the comic book industry, and because we just love to hear about the origin stories of how the creators on our show, on our podcast being interviewed, how they entered into the comic book, into the love of comics. So we'll start off.
Yeah, so Erica and I have been writing together for a few years now, and we've written for TV and video games, and we had adapted comic books before, like when we worked at Telltale, we adapted the Walking Dead comics into video games, and we'd always loved comics and wanted to write comics, and so we saw that the DC Comics writing program was accepting applications, so we applied. And I'll let Erica take the story from there since
well, I'm going to take the story even further back. So I was born and raised in Florida, and Desiree Proctor is a bit of a military brat. So she actually grew up around the country. So her family has been in the military for many different generations, which kind of plays into a little bit of our comic book Nuclear Power. But we're both, our father ended up settling in Florida. And so we both went to the same college together at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, and made our way from Florida to Los Angeles and ended up like meeting and kind of bonding, like truly first over being fans of genre and fans of comics. And the both of us would go to Comic-Con and kind of be those like, wide-eyed kids in a candy store where you're like peering in the window and being like, how do we get there? How do people do that, for a living? And, that's like what Desiree said. It was kind of like slow building blocks of like becoming a writing team, and then trying to write samples at first in television, and then writing for a video game company, which Desiree just shouted out, Telltale Games, which was kind of getting us like closer and closer and closer. And then when the DC Comics program opened up, we applied, and one of the requirements was that you had to have published material. And what we considered published was a video game. So we actually ended up submitting some of our video game work for consideration. And the lovely ladies over at DC thought that that was an interesting application because other people had been able to write comic books before, and we hadn't had that opportunity. So we were ultimately, accepted into that program and loved it, learned a lot. We can talk about that later. But, we still were like, well, how do we tell not just, Batman stories or Wonder Woman stories? How do we create new characters? And, here we are now launching Nuclear Power.
So amazing. So amazing. How about you, Lynne? Where did your love for comics stem from?
Okay. Well, let's go way back to like when I was 6 or 7 years old. So I was born and raised in Hawaii, and my parents are from Japan. And in order to encourage me to learn Japanese, they kind of indulged me in like buying anything, like reading material Japanese wise. So like a lot of manga.
Yes.
That's how I felt. That's how I got really enamored with like just the storytelling aspect of comic books. It was just really amazing. It was like magic to me. I really want, it was like, I don't know if many people know Doraemon, but that was the series that was like, it made me cry. I was 7 years old and it made me cry. It was such a good story. And then also, when I said I wanted to become a comic book artist to one of my friends, she said, like, you can't become a comic book artist. So just out of spite, I became one.
I love that.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Anyway, fast forward, I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, which I majored in cartooning. I interned at Marvel and DC. I'm gonna wrap it up. I interned at Marvel and DC, became an assistant editor at Marvel Comics for a short while. Then after that, I became like a corporate artist at a toy company. And then many years later, I decided to go freelance because the toy company went.
Oh.
And well, it was something I was planning to do anyway. I really wanted to become a comic book artist. And so I decided to become a freelance comic book artist. Pretty much the DC, the artist workshop opened up and there was like, you know, a worldwide, you know, contest application for it. Got in. That's, you know, through that program, even though Desiree and Erica were part of the writers and I was the artist, we still like met each other and that's how we kind of hooked up. That's how we're here today. Yes.
And we became obsessed with Lynne's artwork and, you know, didn't want to at one point when we thought we couldn't get her for this book, we were like, what's the point of doing the book? Like, that's how good her art is.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Thank
Man,
you.
the art is stunning. It was one of the things that caught my eye right away. It was really amazing. So you guys tell the audience about nuclear power. What is nuclear power about?
Yeah, it is an Cold War alt history take on the Cuban Missile Crisis. It kind of posits like if the Soviets and the United States had actually nuked each other on Black Saturday in 1962 and caused World War III, what the United States might look like today. And our take on it is this new country that's a military dictatorship that's stuck technologically in the 1960s. And our main character learns like the government she works for is keeping a dark secret from its people, which we get into later in the issues.
Yeah, and this was kind of heavily inspired by, you know, our upbringing in Florida. Both my mom and Desiree's mom are Cuban and Cuban American, and being raised in that culture where, you know, there was a lot of hostility towards, I mean, there's less hostility towards Latinos in general in this country. There tended to be, and Cubans, especially back in the 1960s when the Cuban Missile Crisis was happening. So it was really influential to us.
Yeah, and that's kind of how like the new country that's formed in the comic book and nuclear power, it's like it's modeled after Cuba. Like it's technologically stuck in the 1960s and there's like this dictatorship that's kind of controlling everything.
Yeah, definitely. It's really good. There's like a couple of secrets, a few secrets the government's keeping, and it's just really engaging. So did you want to add anything else, Lynne, about the comic?
Well, I probably was attracted to it because, you know, Desiree and Erica are really strong writers. And like it was a story about a woman's agency. So that intrigued me. Yeah. So
That's, oh my God, this is such a dream team. I mean, seriously, you guys have to pick up that book. It's so really good. And I'm really excited because you can pre-order the trade paperback now. So I'm very excited about that.
Yes, it comes out in October to actually coincide with the anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh
so
my
that's
God.
like we intentionally are like releasing, you know, the digital issues monthly up to an October release. And if you pre-order like pretty soon, like, you know, you may get some signed things and some posters, cooler art from Lynne.
That's so cool. And oh my God, attention to detail. I love that. That is super cool. Well, Lynne, the art is super stunning. Like I said before, it's so dynamic. At times it feels like the characters are moving like at a rapid pace. What I mean to say is that the illustrations of the comic book have a lot of movement, and in the paneling, I really love that. I just recently saw Akira, and it kind of reminded me of those fast-paced moments, like, you know, those chase scenes, and it was just, I loved it. How did you decide your artistic method for this particular comic book?
So basically, because I was doing all of the art, including the coloring and the lettering, I had to sort of kind of simplify the coloring aspect of it so I could have less choices to make. So that's why I went with that, monotone, is that what you call it? Duotone. But like the red color scheme or the single green color scheme and things like that. I sort of got inspired by Darwin Cook's Richard Parker, which is like a wonderful comic. I really recommend it. Also, as far as like the action scenes and stuff like that, that is heavily influenced by Japanese storytelling, the manga-esque style, which is like lots of speed lines, lots and lots of speed lines.
My God, I can't believe the color was inspired by, because you're doing all of the work yourself. But it looks like so detailed, like you put a lot of thought into it and a lot of method into it, and it turns out that just because you were working on everything, you decided on this aspect of coloring, which I think is really brilliant. I love
Thank
it.
you.
I mean, I was just like, oh my God, the clean lines and the expressions. I mean, your art conveys so much in each panel, and it's really amazing.
Thank you very much.
It's such a great compliment to the great story along with it. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you guys here, because I really love the book, and I hope there's a lot of people that pick it up out there. Do you guys think you guys are going to be releasing it in single issues anytime, or no, just because of COVID?
Well, we're going to be releasing single issues just digitally on Comixology and Hoopla. The first 2 are out now, and then issue 3 comes out next week, and then 4, 5, 6 until October. And then the trade paperback, the hard copy with all 6 issues combined, will be released in October. And that's like what you can pre-order now and get like the exclusive artwork from Lynne.
Yeah, and I mean, to Lynne's art, it felt, I mean, we come from, mainly the background of screenwriting, like her art feels cinematic. Like it feels like when you turn the page, like you're seeing those edits, you know what I mean? And it's like, but it's a seamless, like beautiful thing that, it's like she took what we can do as writers, which isn't like a small task, and elevated what we could do to the point where, she could expertly say like, I need more room here, or like, and she would turn in stuff to us and we would be like, guess what? We don't need all these words because you did more visually than what we could do with language. And like, that's like the beauty of like the creator, like writer / like, artist relationship, where it's like, she can convey things and then it's like, it's redundant to have our words. And like Desiree and I are both very much like, kill your babies, like, delete those lines. Like,
you're like really willing to kill your babies. It's like, wow, they're like not afraid of cutting stuff out.
Yeah, we're cut queens. We'll just like slash our work. I mean, but that's just when you have like a good, it's the same way with writing for television. If you have like a great actor, great director, they can convey so much in like a shot or an expression. And that's what Lynne does with her art. And it's like the words become redundant because the artwork's already conveying that feeling.
Yeah, it does sound silly, but it's like, I mean, her hand is literally like an actor. Like her hand is doing all of the, emotion. Like, in the first issue, when you see the main character's husband, like the anticipation, the excitement on his face, like when we remember when like that drawing came in and we were like, oh my gosh, like it's so exciting. It was just so exciting to see that.
That is so wonderful to hear, because a lot of the times some books that we end up reading are very wordy, and they don't let the artist kind of express what they want to express on the page. And I think it's just wonderful how you guys have this really great relationship where, like Lynne was saying, you guys are cut queens, but you guys, really, it's like, I feel like the relationship and the communication is so good here that like just getting the drawings and you're like, okay, I can modify this to just say like 2 words because it's all said in the art. And that is actually what I was going to ask next, but you guys completely took over. I love it. With regards to women characters and storytelling, we often see stereotypes and tired tropes utilized in mainstream entertainment. Tell us how you combat those in your work. We'll start with Desiree.
One thing that we did, which was a recommendation with Barbara and Bryant to try to combat stereotypes, is we had sensitivity readers on our scripts. So Barbara and Bryant would send our scripts out to readers before Lynne would even start drawing, to make sure, especially since we were dealing with such hot button topics in the comic, to make sure that basically we weren't offending anybody, because that's definitely not our intent. Our intent is to tell an engaging, entertaining, exciting story that also has a strong message. So we didn't want our message or anything like that to get muddled. So sensitivity readers was definitely a big help.
Yeah. And I think even, like sort of subconsciously when we created the character of Claudia, she's a white lady, and, like we are, Desiree and I are both like Cuban American. So it's like, we are half white as well. And it was like, what are we saying when we put, like a white woman in this position, like where she's been very loyal to the government. This has been her whole life, the military background. And she learned something that's like very upsetting about her government. And, the people who are our variants and like the people who are like over the wall, like we're more like darker skinned people, like Latino people, like all this. And it's like, how does this like white woman like kind of like open up her viewpoint a little bit in the world and like have a change of heart and like kind of see the other side of things. And like, there was a big, disappointing thing that happened in 2016 when like, 60% of white women voted in a way that you wouldn't expect them to vote, against their own interests, against their own bodies. And, for us, it was like, that kind of subconsciously, I think, sort of like seeped through, and like we wanted her to be a strong, empowered character, but we also, like wanted her to have a change of heart.
And we also didn't want to lean into the like chosen one trope, because like in the comics, in the story, the cause that Claudia ends up joining is a cause that started long before she joined it. And as the story continues, we'll see like it continues and will always continue like past her importance. And that's just true with any movement. There's always like, it takes lots of people. So, I think I'm getting a bit away from the original question, but a lot of that stuff did influence like what character, the character designs.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like how sympathetic she is, but also because I think in her situation, she can identify what she needs to do, but also recognize that she was in the wrong the whole time. And I like the fact that she's a strong character and she's gonna do this despite everything and despite what she was living this whole time, like this lie. And I really love that. I also love how the characters and a lot of the dialogue and some of the story actually reflects what we're living in right now. One of the lines I think I really loved, it's not, it's not a direct quote because I can't recall the exact words, but basically it was something like one of the characters said, that's been the agenda from the beginning. Like they want us to hate each other. And I was like, oh my God, you just hit me in the feels, guys. Lynne, as the artist of the comic book, what are some of the things that you wanted to convey in your art and not like maybe follow stereotypes, or as kind of like the same question I asked them, but in the kind of the artist, the illustration part of the comic?
Well, the thing that Desiree and Erica really wanted to make sure that even the background characters, that they would be diversity, not just in like race or ethnicity or anything like that. There's also like disabilities or anything ableism wise. So I did try. Whether I successfully drew it is another question, because that just kind of depends on my skill. That is the thing, like sometimes you want to draw it a certain way. Does it come off like, I don't know if that came out as clear as I wanted it to, but that kind of comes down to your own skill level. So if some people dissatisfied how it looks, like, sorry, I wasn't good at drawing it. That's the main thing. Which is like funny, like as far as like trying to respect the individualities and the backgrounds of any characters like that. It does take quite a lot of practice. You know how you see in a lot of comics, same face syndrome? For all the characters look the same. The reason why it's like that is because it's just quicker. You know, it is an economy issue. Keeping track of different types of faces, and like, you know, and each face would have like a different type of expression regarding that. It becomes very time consuming and very hard, not to mention like you have to kind of practice that skill quite a bit. So yeah, hopefully I succeeded in like expressing that the diversity of the book. Whether I succeed or not is up to you guys. If it's not, I promise to keep on getting better.
Like Erica and I feel too. It's like we try to make this story as inclusive as possible and try to stay away from any sort of, you know, combat any sort of like stereotypes, and hopefully we succeed.
Yeah. Whether we succeed or not, we don't know until we get the reaction. And if we don't, we'll try to be better next time, you know?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm learning so much, especially like from the artist point of view, like having to draw different faces and kind of repeat that throughout the story, and how you have to practice, and it's something you have to actually learn, and a skill that you have to like a muscle that you have to constantly like flex or whatever. But that's something I had no idea about. I'm learning so much. Thank you guys. As women creators and women of color, what unique challenges do you face, and what lessons can you pass on from what you've learned by tackling them? Like I just did that question. I'm like, whoa, what am I reading?
I mean, I'm obviously not a woman of color. Yes, my mom is Cuban, but she's also very white Cubano. And that was actually one of like something that worked out in her favor during when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, when she was a kid in the 60s. You know, there was attacks in Florida against people of Cuban descent or people that look like they are of Cuban descent. And because my mom and her family were white enough, they had like that white privilege that they could hide behind. Like, it's like, okay, we stopped speaking Spanish. We like, my mom's cousin had like a belt with like Cuban flags on it, and she like painted over the flags. And it's like, okay, we're going to become as American as possible. Quote unquote American, the idea of American at the time in the 60s. So I think like that's something that I've always from a young age been aware of having like that privilege, that like because of my being white, I was like, my mom and was sheltered a bit from that, and like I've had privileges because of that. But I mean, there definitely has been challenges just being a woman and working in like male dominated industries and working in entertainment. And I think the best advice I can give to a woman is in a workplace is like, always try your best to like be in a situation that you can walk away from. Like
the power of no.
The power of no, and also the power of like I was working when I was coming up in the industry, I was working at like a commercial production company, and I was working as a PA, and I was barely making ends meet. And this is like the highest paying job I had ever had. And the producer like made a pass at me. I said, I'm not interested. And then a few days later at the Christmas party, the owners of the commercial production company, 2 women came up to me and said, if you don't sleep with Carrie, we can't hire you.
Oh my God.
And like that from other women was just like, you expect it from the guy, but from other women, it's just like, oh my gosh. And so like having being able to just walk away from that job, which was hard, and having to go back on unemployment. Like, thank God California has a great unemployment program. But like, it's not easy, but if you have the ability to just like walk away, even if it does, like I was in debt for a while after that, I'm not gonna lie, but you know, it's hard, but just trying to, like, if you can, not try to like make sacrifices of your own morals.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's amazing. Oh, I felt that. Oh gosh, that's, oh wow, that really was something. Erica, what about you?
I mean, for me, you know, my mom came over when she was a teenager from Cuba, and I think there was, you know, a lot of anger in the Cuban community, like when you left everything behind and you lost everything there, and you're so fucking pissed at like your country and what happened. And, you know, she had to leave like her oldest brother behind, who was my uncle, like because he was like forced into the military service and taken away from them, and like coming into this country where, you know, they were then assigned like to go to Chicago. It's like, so imagine like living your entire life in the tropics and then like having to face the Chicago winter. So she came over saying like, that place betrayed me. Where I grew up, I'm no longer from there anymore, and I'm 100% American. Kind of like, you know, what Desiree was saying, like she wanted to desperately lose her accent. There was going to be like, she didn't teach me Spanish because she was trying to learn and perfect her English, like, and she was watching all of the like, you know, American soap operas. So I'm actually named after Erica Kane and all my children, like, because like you know, it was like she loved the Dallas Cowboys, like, you know, it was all of these you know, efforts to try to now belong in this like new place. And it's like, you know, as a country nowadays, it's like we're finally at a place where like, you know, people can celebrate like, you know, being Chicana or like, you know, being Puerto Rican, and like, and you can be open about that. And like in her time, it wasn't that. And like, I think even, you know, like when I was growing up, like in the 90s, it was like, I grew up in Tampa, so there was actually a lot of Cuban people around. You felt like there was actually like more of a community. And now, like, as things have, you know, like somehow like gotten worse over the past few years, it's like, it's sad to me that people have to hide whatever, you know, cultural identity they have, you know, like it's just, it's such a tragic thing. And like, you know, as a female creator, and when we were doing this book, it was almost scary how things like kept happening that were relevant in the news, like the threat of nuclear war, abortion issues, like women's rights, like all of these things kept happening. And it's like, oh no, are we writing and predicting this stuff? This is scary. We should stop and just like write about how everyone loves each other and like, you know, and eats cotton candy. And like, it should be great. But we also wanted to, like, as Desiree said, like not offend anyone, but also like try to take a look at issues like without flinching at them, much like in Desiree's story that she just told. It's like, she had to not flinch basically and walk away from that. And, you know, that's kind of what we wanted to bring into this story as well.
Awesome. Lynne, what about you?
Okay, let me think. Well, as far as like a minority creator, I a message to probably other artists. I'm very proud of my Japanese heritage. I am lucky enough to be able to speak the language and read the language. No, even though I've never lived in Japan, I know quite a bit about the culture. I usually put out an open invitation to any other creators, like if they have any questions about the culture, if they need like a quick translation and they want to know more about it, don't be afraid to ask me. I'm a resource. I'm always for more accurate representation. So, and also I kind of give this advice to other minority creators too. If you feel confident in representing your culture, yeah, offer that to other people. It's like, yeah, if you need any questions about Korean / indigenous / whatever, you know, culture, you know, feel free to ask me. I want to see more, you know, art and stories out there that has good representation. So that is sort of like my message to
I love
everybody.
it. I
And
love it.
as far as as far as the artist being a woman, I think it's hard when you're an artist. Like you have to be a person that to receive criticism is a necessary part of growth. You have to seek it out. Sometimes it comes without invitation. We get that a lot on Twitter. But yeah, but as far as a creator, you kind of have to navigate the criticism. It takes skill to receive criticism. It takes skill to give criticism. Learn both. If you do get those kind of criticisms that sort of kind of goes on the sexist slant, don't let it affect your self-worth. Try to kind of, sometimes it'll be like good advice, but sort of like masked in a like weird sexist way, and like kind of like learn to like, what is this person trying to tell to me? Take the stuff that they're trying to say and leave the crap out. So like learn how to take that kind of criticism, not like, oh, you need to build like, a stronger shell and not be like so emotional about it. Not that kind of stuff. Just like learn to critically assess their criticisms, and therefore you'll be able to give good criticism yourself. So yeah, never let it affect your self-worth. It's just a critique on your art, not you.
Wow, that is really profound. I mean, I've actually sucked that in right now, and I'm like, I could put it in a lot of parts of my life, not just podcasting or work. I mean, it's just a really great advice. I love that. It's amazing. Erica and Desiree, you guys started telling us about that DC Comics Writers Program. Tell us more about that.
Oh my gosh, that was such a great program.
And
it was amazing. It was almost like going back to college again, except it was like the College of Comics.
And who taught it, guys?
Scott Snyder.
Oh.
Yes.
So
big Batman guy.
So what was that like besides being like a college experience? I mean,
it was a really small group. I think there was only like 8 writers chosen. Desiree and I were the only writing team, and we were the only women, and I believe the youngest who were chosen in the program, which was really interesting. And all of our classmates were wonderful. They were like very supportive and great. And we would all, because they're actually scattered around the world, like one of our classmates was in Australia. Scott was in New York. We were in LA. One of the guys was in Florida. So we would all do like Zoom before Zoom was cool. And yeah. And it was pre-pandemic. So like we would all hop on at a certain time. Like Scott would, lead us through like a few hours long class like every week. And then we had a lot of reading and writing assignments. So we would read not just DC Comics, but Marvel as well. And kind of, he would talk to us about like, what does it mean? And how do you structure this? And how many words per bubble? But like, what are you trying to convey? And also, just give amazing feedback along with like, the executives who are also at DC, like popping in and out, introducing us to editors, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was interesting because they also taught us how to they format their scripts at DC. And then when we sent our first script to Lynne, she's like, guys, don't do it this way. The way they taught us was like, you kind of like dictate to the artist, like how many panels are in the page, like which lines go in which panels, what's happening in the action, which Erica and I didn't like doing anyway.
No. And Lynne is just like, as we cannot say enough nice things about her and her artwork. It's like, she's such an expert at like looking what's there on the page and what kind of emotion or what kind of like, plot point we're even trying to convey, and saying like, well, this is how much space I need to do it. Like, you guys, settle down. Like I can deliver what you want, like right here. She would never say that, but that's what I wanted her to say.
Yeah, we ended up kind of using more of like a structure. Our scripts that we sent to Lynne was more of like a structure that you would use in like a play, where you have like the character's name dialogue and then like brief action description lines, very, very, very brief. Mm-hmm. And we just kind of sent that to Lynne. We're like, we think this might be 5 pages, and sometimes she'd be like, this will be 2, or this will be 7. Like,
yeah. And then when it came to like the historical details, as you pointed out earlier, like there are a lot of like little things in there. It would be like, if we're trying to do this particular battleship, we would then like pull some images. So then Lynne knew kind of like, or it's this electronic device that only existed like pre-1962, and this is kind of the feel for it. And then, Lynne, you can talk more about our Pinterest page.
Oh yeah. So like made a Pinterest is so wonderful. It's also a time suck. It's so good. But yeah, I created a special Pinterest page where it was I will gather resources and references for the comic. There'll be a lot of like propaganda posters from the Soviet Union and things like that, or like World War II posters during the World War II posters from both America and the Soviet. So you get that look and patriotic feel, so we get inspired, as well as like graphic elements. Like, so how about this kind of idea for the cover? It's like, oh, that's good. I found this online. Oh, put it on Pinterest. And so it's like a great way a collaboration tool for that. Yeah.
That is so cool. I'm so glad that you guys mentioned that you did a lot of research because that's really important. A lot of people don't put that extra effort into it, and it kind of shows, and it's like it takes us out of the actual story. And I just love comics that'll teach you a few things along the way. So I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Lynne, you are an alumnus of DC Comics, the 2016 Talent Development Program. Tell us what that was like.
So the people that were invited to the artist workshop, we were all pretty much already professional comic book artists. So it wasn't like we were learning from scratch. So even one of them, Ibrahim Mustafa, he was like an Eisner Award winner by the time we got in there. But basically, the only thing was like none of us have been in mainstream comics. You know, it was mostly just small press or indie stuff. So that was an invitation. So we pretty much all had the skills as comic book artists already. It was more like sort of like a refinement and sort of like this is how DC does it and shows how DC Comics do their comics. We were actually we did not do Zoom. We actually got invited to the DC Comics headquarters in Burbank. And we all got invited there. They put us up in a hotel, and we had like, how many days was it? 10 days?
Wow.
Yeah, so 10 days. We're in the offices. They gave us desks. You know, they said like, does anybody need computers and stuff like that? So, no, we brought our own. So they used like, and but yeah, it was pretty cool. We Andy Kubert and Klaus Jansen were our instructors. We got to meet all the DC editors, and one of the coolest thing was that we'll have assignments, and pretty much like you give the same script to like, you know, was it 8 artists? Yeah, 8 artists, and then like get 8 different things from the same script. It is so fascinating to see how each different artist will interpret the same script. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe how you thought of doing that. That's so cool. Like, oh, that is so much more better how to do that than I did. I would have done it like that. Or I was like, oh God, did you just finish that in 2 hours?
That's so cool.
There was always that one artist who like finish something in like 6 hours. Like, you finished the page in 6 hours. That's elite. He was the first who like finished like a page in 6 hours. Like actually, Desiree and Erica worked with them in like the new talent showcase book. But yeah, he is super fast.
Yeah, he's great. And he's such a nice person too.
Yeah, he is wonderful. Yeah.
That is super cool. Like, I never thought that, well, of course, everything's, you know, the way any individual person interprets it, but just hearing you talk about like one script and how like there's like 3 different, 8 variations of like the same stuff in a totally different spin. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So we have a segment on our podcast called Chisme de la Semana. Are there any stories, comics, projects that you are currently working on that you could share with us?
Desiree and I are actually both working on a Disney Channel series about a superhero, but we can't go into too much details about it, which is really fun. So that's been a great experience. And we're also like, you know, trying to put together what our next comic may be down the line.
Awesome. What about you, Lynne? Any chisme for us?
Yes, I could share this because it's been announced. So I'm working on a story with Marvel. It is called Marvel Voices Identity. Yeah, Marvel Voice Identity. I'm doing a short Silk from Spider-Verse.
Oh, nice.
A 5-page story of Silk Spider-Verse with writer Marine Gu. So I'm having fun drawing that right now, actually. And,
awesome.
Yeah, I have to finish it this month.
That's so exciting.
Yes, so that's the project I'm working right now. And I've also made my first loaf of whole wheat bread.
So when is that issue of Identity Silk coming out?
I think October.
Okay.
I'm like always fuzzy about like releases because there's like the release and then like another date that has a second release. I don't know how. I used to work at editorial, so I don't understand how that works. It's like a release before the release before it goes into the, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's October. I think. Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll look for it at Heidi Ho Comics. That's where I have my pull list.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, tell us, guys, where can our listeners find your work and support your endeavors, and any social media, online conventions, websites? Well, you already told us, but just remind them, where can they get Nuclear Power?
They can get Nuclear Power at nuclearpowercomic.com. That's where you can pre-order the trade paperback, which comes out in October. And if you pre-order before August, you get like a bunch of exclusive artwork. And then the first 2 issues are on Comixology and Hoopla right now.
And
Awesome.
the 3rd issue will be out next week, the last week of June. And you can find me at Twitter at Erica Harrell and nuclearpowercomic.com.
Yeah, and we'll also be at Mid-City Comic-Con in August.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, how exciting.
I know, it's so great that conventions are coming back.
I know. I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited as well.
Yeah.
Yes, we can finally re-up our nerd wardrobes.
Yeah, I love conventions because you can pretty much wear whatever you want. It's like, no holds barred. You can, wear your Halloween costume. You can cosplay. You can wear that like ball gown you've been wanting to wear. You can wear that outrageous makeup. I mean, I just can't wait.
Yeah.
What about you, Lynn? Where can people find you? Any social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Protokitty Art. Wait a minute, what was my handle? Anyway, Protokitty Art or Protokitty at Twitter. Also, you can find me on Facebook at Lynne Yoshii Art. Also, I have a website, Lynne Yoshii. I'm really bad at social media, so if I don't update for a while, it doesn't mean that I'm dead. It's just because I miss me.
It's a full-time job, isn't it? You're just
it's
like,
hard.
Oh
Social media gives me anxiety. I can't go on Twitter anymore because it makes me sad.
Oh my god, like there's all these new ways to post stuff, like to promote your shows or your art, whatever, but it just is so time consuming. I totally get it. I
just want to draw. This wasn't part of like, they didn't cover this in our school.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, that has been the end of this interview. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I've learned so much. I really miss my co-hosts, but I learned so much. And you guys have been amazing. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories and sharing the story that you guys are promoting. And don't forget to pick up that book, guys. Thank you guys for being here. I have been the host, Sarah.
I'm Desiree.
I'm Erica.
I'm Lynn.
And don't forget to
like and subscribe
this channel.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank